Hi, my name is Bruce Bolger. I'm the founder of the Enterprise Engagement Alliance, and we're dedicated to helping organizations improve performance through a strategic focus on people. And here we are today on the sixth anniversary of the Business Roundtable's pronouncement that all organizations or their member organizations should focus on addressing the needs of all their stakeholders. And we have with us today, truly, I believe, the founder or one of the founders of the whole concept of stakeholder capitalism, R. Edward Freeman. He's professor at the Darden School at the University of Virginia, and he wrote, and we'll get to that in a minute, uh, the book that really set the stage for stakeholder capitalism theory, although Ed will graciously say that other people before him, founded a lot of the concepts, but we'll get to that. And then we also have Gary Rhoads today. He is professor emeritus at the Marriott School at Brigham Young University, and he co-wrote, or I should say, he assisted with the writing of our book, Enterprise Engagement, which came at stakeholder engagement or capitalism in a very different way, but I believe with many of the same foundations. So, just a quick other little bit of news. You should know that Ed wrote again the book, Strategic Marketing, A Stakeholder Approach. And that was in 1984, interestingly. And then much more recently, The Power of And, which he wrote with colleagues at Brigham Young University, pardon me, at Darden.
Okay.
And our books, again, which come at the topic from a very granular standpoint, right down to the nitty-gritty of implementation and marketing and communications. So quite different approach. And then finally, our organization, we consider ourselves the how-to organization for the implementation of quality management for people, which is we called enterprise engagement and very related, we believe, to the work of Ed. So I'm now going to shut this stuff off with a little bit of help. And I'm going to start with you, Ed. When you wrote the book in 1984, I believe you were a philosophy, you had gotten your PhD in philosophy, but what made you write this book?
Well, it's really, I wrote it from ignorance. I was trying to figure out what this stuff called business was. I was working with a research center at Wharton, and we were doing projects with companies. So I was out in the real world trying to make sense of what companies were doing. I wasn't burdened down, since my PhD was in philosophy, with all the management theory and what companies were supposed to be doing, like creating value only for shareholders. And it seemed to me what the companies I was working with were doing is they were trying to figure out how to deal with their customers and suppliers and employees and their communities and the people with money. And that seemed to me to be what they were doing. They didn't often realize that they were doing all these things, but that's what the that's so I was just trying to make sense of what business was doing, and I wasn't burdened down, thank goodness, by all the stuff that we teach in business schools, having never had a business course. So I didn't know that they were supposed to be people were supposed to be nakedly self-interested and only worried about their short-term economic self-interest and all kinds of assumptions like that. I came at it that these were real kind of functioning human beings, grown-ups, who were trying to figure out how to do their job well.
So you weren't, when you wrote the book, and we're going to get them back more into that, you weren't there carrying a Bible telling businesses that they had to be morally, ethically great. And so were you there?
No,
That wasn't your intent at all, was it?
no, no. Look, I was trying to make sense of what they were doing. I just assumed that most people want to do the right thing, which I think is true. So I didn't have this idea that business was a bunch of greedy little bastards out trying to do each other in. I thought they're just human beings, and most human beings do want to do the right thing. They want to teach their children to get along in the world. They want to, take care of their neighbors when they can. And I saw them as fully human. I didn't separate the business part from the ethics part because I just didn't know. I didn't know that separation was alive and well in business
Hmm.
schools. I found it
Well, it's
out. but I didn't know that was there.
So,
So again, it
Gary,
was ignorance.
well, sometimes ignorance is bliss, and led to obviously some, I think, incredible insights. Gary, isn't it interesting? The reason, I think we got to know each other back in the 2000s was that you were actually, even though you're a professor, you were actually and are an entrepreneur. And
Right,
a lot of your work was at the practical intersection of customer and employee engagement,
right.
the companies that you founded. So tell us a little bit on your path. You had a very different path to understanding the importance of managing for stakeholders. What was your
Right.
path to that?
So, very much like Professor Freeman. And by the way, it's great to be here with you. And I've read your stuff before. I'm
Same
gracious.
here, Gary.
And I'm just trying to, so I'm a practical standpoint for entrepreneurship, right? We have to meet investors' demands, but at the same time, we have to develop products that have value in the market. And so one of the companies I co-founded was Allegiance, which is in 2015 was sold to Merit CX and so forth. But what was really interesting is the reason I developed the technology is I wanted to increase customer engagement, right? Excitement about product services. And so in doing that, of course, I developed two modules in the software. One is with the whole idea that if when it makes sense logically and everybody agrees with it, is that if you increase employee engagement, you get customer engagement, and that to isolate the two. But what we found is most companies were just buying the customer engagement module. They were really interested in knowing how engaged customers were, but yeah, they kind of knew that employee engagement was important too. But the reality is, uh, you can't really have sustained customer engagement unless you have employee engagement. There's a spillover effect, and even though a lot of companies would give that lip service, I finally had one company say, "Gary, you're always telling us this. Why don't you prove it?" It was a Fortune 20 company, right, in 50 countries. And it's a good thing I had a minor in statistics in my PhD program. So they gave me all this data, and I said, "Yeah, I mean, because we'll find it." And they said, "Show us," right? So out of these 50 countries and these huge data sets, we did the analysis, and sure enough, we found that in countries where employee engagement was high, so was customer engagement. And and people listening to this, well, of course you'd expect to find that, but no one really believes it. I mean, to some extent, they don't. I don't know why they don't. So then, when we showed them that in countries and where the employee engagement was low, so was customer engagement. And it's so logical, right? If employees aren't really excited about your products and services, why should the customers be? And so trying to solve these practical solutions. So then companies started developing alignment measurement systems because they realized, because see, it's a long term. And I think Professor Freeman said the same thing. It's if you look long term, it's not short term. We had lagged variables, right? We had 3 years of data, and so that would show is that when employee engagement and satisfaction was low, you take it about 3 to 6 months, then the customers started feeling it too, and so there was a lag period. So, uh, just trying to solve the problems of companies, that I would tell them, well, if you really want in the long run high customer engagement, you've got to have a system that engages your employees. And
Well, we have a long way to go
yes,
because I just saw yesterday the American Customer Satisfaction Index report came out.
right,
Record low customer satisfaction, going
yes,
down, down, down. But what's going up? Corporate profits.
yeah,
So
yeah,
companies are actually, and again, I don't want to get this causation correlation issues that you
right.
but so Ed, let me ask you this. When you wrote the book and you did the research, you stumbled upon this incredible notion, and again, others had talked about it, Peter Drucker, Demings, that there is a relationship between stakeholders, that there aren't these silos that divide them in real life, that we're all interconnected. In fact,
Yeah.
Drucker and Demings always talked about internal customers, not just external customers. So, Ed, what was what is your big lesson to companies about stakeholders? What have, most companies are still siloed. Most companies look like feudal organizations with dukes and barons, in my view.
Yeah. Well,
What?
I don't know about most. I mean, there are companies that look like that. Again, most companies are single on entrepreneurs or small family
Yeah.
companies. But I think we pay way too much attention to large, publicly traded companies, which look like they're kind of on the way out. If you look at how many of them are going private. But look, I thought this was complete common sense.
Yeah.
And all I'm doing, I'm trying to figure out all this stuff I was seeing, and I was helping companies, primarily in telecom, deal with stakeholders that were coming out of the woodwork, in rate cases and this stuff. I didn't make this stuff up. I was watching what they were doing and trying to help them do it better. Stakeholder theory is the most practical thing in the world, and it still seems to me absolutely common sense. If you want to build a great business, you better take care of customers. You need suppliers. In fact, let me tell you the story in a slightly different way. I was at dinner with a guy who had uh, uh, been a congressman for a long time. And he said to me, he said, Ed, suppose I just care about the money. And I looked right at him and I just said, how are you going to make it? You better have some customers who want what you sell. You want suppliers to make you better. Yeah, as Gary said, if you don't have employees who are committed to that, you're not going to build a successful company.
In the
You at
long
least want communities who don't throw you out. And if you do those things and get kind of lucky, maybe you'll make money. He sort of seemed like he never thought about this before. And so I think the, the reason this common sense and the reason companies might not get it is this old story about business. It's what we teach. Business about the money. And that's what's important. And it is important. But it's not about just making money. That's not what business is. And this old story has a real grip on us. And one of the great things about what the Roundtable did is they're trying to break the grip of that. You got to break the grip of the story. And you start by saying, hey, can we build a vocabulary? Can we build a way to talk about this and think about this that gets us out of it's only the money that counts, right? Now, that's the task that we have, and it's what I think a lot of people have been doing for the last 40 plus years or so.
Well, and Gary, I'm going to get to you on this. I
Sure.
think we were really making great progress in so many ways, and we still are. And ironically, the Business Roundtable, I don't think they meant to, but they actually opened up a can of worms because, as we all know, a very practical, common sense approach to business, which really is similar, Ed, to I've studied total quality management my entire career, and some of the similarities of they discovered in the ISO standards that if you don't harmonize the interests of your stakeholders, you're going to have confusion and disarray and lack of performance. So, Gary, what is standing in the way of such a practical approach?
Okay, well, I think it goes back, both Ed and I are both faculty at universities. And I teach in the business school. And so let's just take it from the beginning. Business schools, how they organize, finance department,
Mhm.
marketing department, accounting department, right? They don't integrate a lot, right?
That's right.
And so you go and you get your degree in one area and that becomes your kingdom. That's your silo, right? And then all of a sudden you go out in the real world and you realize I really need an accountant who understands engagement. I need a financial person who really understands HR, And in most companies, there's even a pecking order of who's important. Go into any company and ask what's most important, they'll tell you different things. I mean, look in healthcare. The person that's most important is obvious is the nurse, the one that's on the forefront interacting with the patient. The person that's least important in healthcare from a financial and receiving resources and everything is the nurse. Why do they have burnout the highest level in the healthcare with nurses? Because they go in thinking I'm here to engage the customers and and everything else, and then they find that they get no resources for engagement, right? So you've got these natural tensions in these organizations. Like customers want lower prices, employees want better pay, shareholders want faster growth, communities want responsibility. How do you balance that? And I said at our university many times, we need to teach, we need to find students. That's what's really valuable, that go across these silos, right? And I really like the idea, and we know there's emergent interest in this business roundtable, because when I was able to get accounting and customer engagement and HR all together in one room, they found they all of a sudden understood how they all connect. But a lot of times they don't know how they connect. They just don't know how to connect. And we are so siloed, it's just hard to break that. And I don't think till we get into universities and teach people to have skills across silos, we're going to continue having those kinds of problems and tensions.
Ed, at Darden, are you guys able to break that down? Are you doing a better job at giving
Well,
your students?
everybody here is a professor of business administration. We're not professors of marketing or ethics
Okay.
or that sort of stuff. We still have the silos. There's no question that they're there, but we also, I mean, I teach in the ethics area, but I also teach in the strategy area and leadership. And we tend to teach joint classes. We do ethics classes with operations people, with finance and strategy. And so we try to do this. I think part of the problem was in the academic world, the strategy people used to have a course called business policy, and that the point of that course was to integrate things. And then the strategy as a field decided to be more, quote, scientific. Policy courses went away, and Porter and others' economics sort of ruled the day. And we lacked that integration. I've always wanted to teach a course called business. And
Yeah.
business would be taught by somebody who's basically a qualitative person and somebody who's basically a quantitative person. And the cases would all be, they
Yeah.
wouldn't have little, this is a finance case or this is an ethics case, and this is a business case. And the students would actually have to figure out what were the concepts, what were the techniques, etc., that they needed to use. And you do this within the idea that business is a set of stakeholder relationships. And of course, I'm far too lazy to actually to do all the work it would take to teach that course. But that's the kind of thing we need
Yeah,
to
that's what we
do.
need.
Uh,
You
in
know, by the way,
sports,
I had a course like that in history at New York University where they had and it was the best course I can ever remember. There was an expert it was the French Revolution. There was an expert in history, in art history, in music, and in
yeah,
literature. And it
yeah.
wrapped up the whole period, and it actually changed my life. I went to live in France. But back to you, Gary, both of you. It's interesting. I don't want to waste time on how this practical subject got derailed by politics. Ed, we've already had this
Right.
discussion. It's actually a funny story, but I think we're entering a new phase. I think we're entering a phase now where everybody's shut up on the flag waving. That's all gone. And maybe some of the conservatives were right that there was a lot of virtue signaling and hypocrisy
Yeah.
going on. But what I do like to see now is the focus on actual impact, Ed, because it's amazing that we do a great job of measuring investments, return on investments if we're doing a plant or R&D, if we're building a building, but we invest in people. I don't see any practical impact measurements at all or
Oh,
regularly. And yet, and yet, if you really study it, if you really look at impact, if you're familiar, Gary, with the human capital factor
Right.
that Dan Ariely has developed from Duke, okay, irrational capital. I don't know whether you gentlemen are familiar with that, but they have done a very rigorous analysis and have found a very clear connection between high levels of employee commitment, appreciation, and stock performance. Future equity value creation, they've pegged it at about 4%. Two of the stock funds that are using it, the ETFs, have outperformed consistently the S&P 500. Now, I don't think that people are the only factor of success. We all know that. There are other things. You can have an awful CEO and still make money. But Gary, wow, how good of a job are we doing at really measuring the waste or the added created value by having employees or customers or stakeholders really committed in our mission?
Well, we're not good at it. I mean, I haven't been in many organizations that are good at it, and it's because they don't have alignment metrics, right? I mean, you get what you measure, right? Until you start having alignment metrics and processes, just like TQM is done to products, how do you do the same thing to experiences, right? And so we really don't. I mean, because even that company here, Show Me. Well, why would I have to go through all those countries and do that? You would think that they would have had metrics that capture the degree of employee engagement to customer engagement, and not only that, in supplier engagement. And another company I was in, we found out one of the big predictors of our success was how well our suppliers were engaged, right? And this other national company. And it's funny, we don't have alignment metrics. We don't use them. Now, when you can go in and impact them, you can. But till we get to the point to where we start taking like TQM and take it over experiences and scalable processes, we're never going to get there. And again, that goes because companies know deep down that there's these connections spill over between employees and customers and profitability and value of stock, but they never connect the dots find it in the numbers. And when you connect the dots and numbers, then you see it. And it just takes time and companies just don't do it. I mean, they have people that correct numbers in finances, they have them do the accounting, but they don't really have people where I could go in on one dashboard and see the connection between what my employees are doing, customers doing, suppliers are doing that, and kind of which I call alignment metrics. We they just don't capture it.
Now, Ed, you're at the front lines of this, obviously. Are you seeing more, because you get called in, Yale calls you in,
Right.
Harvard calls you in, India calls you, he gets to travel. But are you seeing a more attention to the actual metrics that whenever they're done, to Gary's point, they are usually find a connection?
Well, I might disagree with Gary with you a little bit on this. I think, of course, you're right. Sometimes we do get what we measure, but we also get what we stand for. And I think the focus on metrics often takes us away from thinking about uh, what we stand for, what we really mean. For instance, if I have a metric, I don't have to worry necessarily about whether I've been really consistent with this particular value or this mission. And so sometimes those things can get in each other's way. Many people think, well, I just got to get the purpose statement. That's all I need. But purpose lives. Purpose doesn't live in the purpose statement. It don't live in the mouse pad. Purpose lives in the systems, in the processes, in the metrics. But they're not the only thing that are here. What's amazing to me is many companies have incredible sets of metrics for stakeholders. Look, name a big company that doesn't measure how it's doing with its customers in 1,000 ways.
Right.
From net promoter score to market share to the other things. Name a big company that doesn't have a employee survey that doesn't look at Glassdoor and see what that is. So there are metrics. I think one of the problems here, again, this is a function of being being in the grip of the old story, is we want one metric that works for all companies,
Hmm.
for all times, and that doesn't work. Business is so different, you know. It's what philosophers would call a family resemblance idea. There's no kind of one definition of all businesses for all times. And so then you get things like ESG that put three different things together, and then we try to find scores for that's going to work for all businesses so we can compare them. And that's just not gonna happen. So the idea of finding the set of metrics that works for all companies,
Yep.
I think is a fool's errand. I think what you said, Gary, is right. You got to do that for your company.
Yeah.
You got to figure that out. Now, again, just capital's ideas here, and I think we've been on with Martin Whitaker before, Bruce, here. Just Capital's idea that they can measure how you're doing with customers and environment. They ought to do suppliers, but they don't.
Yeah.
Employees, and investors, and maybe there's another one on there, and they they rate the Russell 1000. They take the top 100, do an ETF, and they're killing their benchmarks. So again, the evidence is there that this works. We don't need any more studies about that. Does it work all the time? Is it guaranteed? Well, of course not.
No.
Trying to maximize shareholder value. There's no guarantee that's what you're going to do, but it's possible, and that's the question we need to ask. If I manage my company for stakeholders, is it possible that I'll do well financially? And I'm very confident that the answer to that's yes.
I have to break for 1 second to deal with a noise issue here. Please bear with me, and I want to get to you, Gary.
Okay. Yeah, while he's gone, I'll just say this, that yeah, I do agree. When I say alignment metrics, although companies have a lot of metrics, they don't connect them, right?
Yeah.
They don't connect them.
That's right.
Are our customer employees high? Our customer, okay, but when it was high, did we have customer engagement high?
Yeah.
When it was low, they don't longitudinally connect them in a way. So
What?
I
Yeah.
can't see the cause and effect, right?
Yeah.
So they just assume if it's high now, but when it was low, was there any impact on them? And the second is, I do agree with your point on scalable processes, is that, we need more processes, right? That because we get results when we have consistent processes. And I don't know if we have processes that connect all these metrics in
Yeah.
a way that deliver. I think we both agree on that.
Yeah, that's the real problem here.
Yeah.
It's not the metrics that we don't have a good handle on the interdependence.
Yes,
But
that's right.
if I don't understand how does my strategy for customers affect my strategy for employees, affect
Right.
my strategy for suppliers, and vice versa? People get now. I mean, I really do think most people get that, aside from my congressperson that
Right.
I talk to, they get the idea that stakeholders are important.
Right.
Right? I mean, there's some people on the far edges of the political spectrum who still think that it's only about shareholders.
Right.
But I think those are dwindling down. What they don't get is that stakeholders are interdependent, that how you deal with one
Yes.
affects how you deal with the others.
Other.
And what we don't have is we don't have many metrics for interdependence.
Yes,
And
that's exactly.
that's the real I think jewel here is to
Yeah.
think through what are those metrics for interdependence. Some of them might be perceptual.
Right.
I just got to ask them both, if two or three, but we need certainly more attention to
Yeah.
that. We need
I mean,
more attention to the interdependence.
yeah, and a good example, I was working with a company, a financial company, as a consultant, and went in there and I said, "Wow, your quality's really on its way down, right?" And he go, "Well, no, no." And he brought up the data, the metrics, and said, "Our quality's at a peak and everything else." And I said, "Well, not for long." And he goes, "What do you mean?" Because I was in with the employees talking about
Right.
things, and they said our quality is going to hell. You know, and three different groups that I went and measured, and I thought, well then, they know. And of course, 3 months from later, because there's lag periods, the quality just hit that. And then he called me back in. How did you know that? Well, I all I did was talk to your employees about quality issues, and that was a sideline of what I was there for consulting with. And they just said, "Oh yeah, our quality's going to hell, man. It's just so terrible around here," and they're not doing anything about it. They were very predictive. One of the measures is, if you want to know what your future is, ask your employees what's going on right now. And about 90 days later, it's going to happen.
Well, and
Well,
by
I've,
the way,
I've
what
had
you're both
exactly that
saying,
same conversation.
Yeah, is that right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, what you're both really saying, Ed, I know for a fact I've read every piece of research. I mean, gosh, I mean, it's my job. There's so much research to support this connection. But what companies don't have is the interconnected data for their own companies. And one of my daughter's best friends is a head of media for a major advertising agency for one of the top advertisers in the world. Okay, can't name them. But she says they don't have any data at all. This huge company whose credit card you might have in your wallet
Yeah.
has no real data showing the connection between their marketing and how it's actually being connected to their employees and converted into business.
But
And
but
this is
the
an enormous company that spends
Yeah.
probably over $100 million in
but
advertising.
but the
They
issue
can tell
isn't.
how many click-throughs they get. They can even talk about conversions. But let me ask you both something because we're running out of time.
Okay.
I've had an opportunity to, look back in my history of Milton Friedman because of of this anniversary. I read back the New York Times article that he wrote. And there's something very interesting in it. First off, I think he got something fundamentally wrong. And that is that he says the ultimate purpose of the organization is to create a profit. Well, there's something that doesn't work with that because he said that that was the most objective term of defining, how else you can't make a social responsibility. Whose responsibility is it? And he goes into the whole thing about that. No, profit, he says. But wait a second, that doesn't make a lick of sense. ASML, the world's most successful maker of the most sophisticated chip making machines, didn't make money for 7 years. Amazon didn't make money for 8 years. Some companies, Airbnb, they made decisions not to make money at certain times. Isn't really the better North Star, gentlemen, our purpose? Getting back to what you said, Ed. You once, when you and I were discussing the definition of stakeholder capitalism, which, you took issue that there was no need for us to do that, but we kind of did it anyway. And we wrote the definition as we didn't say enhancing profits, and this was you, Ed. We said enhancing or optimizing returns for shareholders only by creating value for employees, customers, stakeholders, all the other things. And to me, the purpose is a far better North Star, isn't it? Because you can't make money if you don't fulfill your purpose. And if you make money the primary decision, you often will ignore your purpose. Is purpose a better benchmark for leadership than profits?
That's Ed, you're going to try to tackle that one first. I mean, that's ideal. I mean, it's nice, but corporations stakeholder primacy with investors and stakeholder, uh, we're still driven in this country by those that invest in the major investors in the company. We're still driven by that primarily.
Well, we're in the grip of the old story, and that's exactly what the old story is. The old story makes a mistake, just a logic mistake about what purpose is.
Yeah.
Look, I need red blood cells to live. It doesn't follow that the purpose of my life is to make red blood cells. Even when, as I did some years ago, have my hips replaced, I lost 4.5 pints of blood. I needed to worry about making red blood cells. It still wasn't the purpose of my life. Businesses must have profits to live. It's a necessary condition. But it doesn't follow that it's a necessary condition for business to be alive, that that's the purpose of a business. That's just a mistake. I mean, that's literally a logic mistake that even someone who didn't know anything about business like Aristotle would not have made. And economists make that mistake again and again. Now, a generous reading is to say, well, they're trying to tell us how markets work. And if people, try to make optimal profits, then we'll have all kinds of markets that work like this and that. I don't care about that. I care about how to run a successful business. And how to run a successful business, you need purpose and profits. It's not one or the other. It's both of them.
Both of
And that's the important point here. I'm not anti-profit. I'm not anti-shareholder. I'm incredibly pro-profit and shareholder. I just think, like I said to that politician, how you going to make it? You got to have both. You got to have purpose, and that's got to speak to your stakeholders. And of course, you got to make money.
And purpose, Gary, in my view, and we're going to wrap up with one last question, each of you, is not a plaque on the wall, right? As you know, it is a fundamental reason for being. Why do we exist as an organization? And I don't know how you can make money unless you have a reason to exist. I mean, getting back to the analogy of the congressman that you were having that conversation with. So, Gary, you're still very actively involved as an entrepreneur. Do you think the stakeholder capitalism movement is alive and well and progressing, or not? And if it's gonna, what's going to be the driver? And the same question to you, Gary, Ed, and we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I do think stakeholder capital. I think people are aware of it. I think they agree with it. But we're still so driven by short-term profits, right? Because of the stock market, everything rewards you for making profit in the short terms, right? And money. So I think a lot of companies would like to get on that bandwagon, have roundtables, get rid of the silos. And of course, we know culture really drives success in the long run. I mean, one thing I used to think, I'm not going to worry about culture. And then I realized, no, culture really does matter. And when we started really reinforcing the culture, the engagement, and in fact, I have one company say, Gary, show us your culture, because you had this one thing, you showed it to me, and basically it said we put customers first. And they even wanted to know what our culture was about and the fact that we put them first, et cetera, right? So, but I guess in answer directly to your question, uh, till we start breaking down silos still, until we start having scalable processes, the interdependence between the measures and that, and when that becomes more of the normal way to measure and look at your companies, it's a still slow evolving process, you know?
Well, Ed, you get the last word.
Well, I mean, I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, look, this is a generational change.
Yes.
How long have we been trying to change the story that men and women are morally equal? And in this country, at least 100 years, how are we doing? Well, it's better, but
Better.
most women would tell you there's still a long way to go. This is going to be a generational change, you know. Business tools are going to have to change or become irrelevant. Businesses are going to have to realize that it's more than just shareholder profits, and they're going to have to realize they need creative imagination to actually figure out how to create win-win-win-win-win strategies. And I'm very optimistic that this is going. I mean, I know when I first started writing about this stuff, nobody cared. And lots of folks care about this today, and they're, literally probably a couple of thousand people doing research on this around the world. So
Yeah.
I'm actually very optimistic about it. I think there's some dangers, one of which is we got to stop saying we don't know how to do this, because we do know how to do it. There are many companies that know how to do it, and there are
Yes.
many academics that know how to do it, and consultants. So I think, look, stakeholder capitalism is about making business better. And if we're not trying to make business better, whether you're an executive or whether are deadbeat academics like Gary and I, it doesn't really matter. We got to make business better. That's what I've been trying to do for the last 40 years or so, and what I'll do, as long as I'm able. Um,
And I'll be writing about it, what you do, as long as I'm able, Ed and
But
Gary.
Ed, there's one things I want to say is, I mean, it can start with simple processes. I know still very few companies that do the roundtables, right? Where I bring in people in HR, people in accounting,
mhm.
people in finance, and just have them sit down. If we could just get to that point that it was taught in the business schools, that every month or every quarterly we do a roundtable discussion, as he has suggested, some companies are doing it. That's a start.
Yeah,
So there is
absolutely.
places to start. Just get them together and talking about it. Because I remember one time when I brought the accounting in and I even had the billing in, and our employees and customer satisfaction was low because billing was doing such a terrible
Exactly.
job. And I said, so what we're going to do in the company right now for the next quarter, any problem we have in billing, we're going to send it to billing and they need to respond to the customers.
Yeah.
Changed the whole
Yeah.
thing. Man, they
Yep.
became the most effective way of doing billing and that. I always say who causes the pain should get the pain. And a lot of time we don't direct the pain to the people causing the pain, and the employees are trying to deal with the pain, but it's billing that's causing the pain. We just gave it to billing. And so I think this roundtable is it's such a simple concept but such a powerful impact. So let's just start simply. I mean, I don't think I ever had in our classes that, one of the things when you organize your organization, bring together all the groups. And we did that in some of our small companies. And it was amazing that everybody was tuned towards the purpose.
Yep. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, one last thing I'm going to comment. Ed, you said a funny thing. You said win-win. I recently asked ChatGPT 5, stakeholder capitalism is such a complicated concept. So many people, they hear that, their eyes glaze over. What is a better way to explain it? And you know what ChatGPT said?
So,
Win-win capitalism.
Yeah.
uh, that's
So,
good.
gentlemen, well, on that note, dedicating our lives to win-win capitalism, besides our children, our family, and our music, is a wonderful journey, and I hope to be on it with you for many years. Thanks again, Ed and
Yeah.
Gary.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Gary.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.